911, what is your emergency?
Units respond code 3 to a 1050 on the highway. Vehicles are blocking multiple
We're en route
lanes
to the
of travel.
hospital. Patient is currently having
We've got a
cardiac
4-alarm
arrest and has
fire
been
here.
intubated.
Send additional
Protesters are
trucks.
outside of City Hall and they are not complying with our
Out
orders
on 1,
to
hold the
disperse.
air.
In a rapidly changing world for first responders where it seems that every day the rules and norms are changing, there is one voice you can count on to give you the latest in emergency news. That is Lifeline. Welcome back to another episode of Lifeline 911 podcast with your host, Erica.
Hello.
I'm your co-host, Gary, and today we have a very special guest with us to talk about complacency in the workplace. Justin Prescott serves as the Director of Operations for American Emergency Preparedness, as well as being an active telecommunicator with the City of Waltham 911. Justin has achieved additional certifications in counterterrorism, emergency medical dispatch, mass casualty incident management, active shooter response, and has a passion for teaching, as evidenced by his serving as a communications training officer and quality control officer at his center. Most importantly for his credentials, Justin has also had the opportunity to work with the one and the only Erica Roberts. Justin, welcome.
Wow. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Erica, for having me.
Dun, dun, dun.
Thank you for joining.
I bet you were like me. You're looking around like, who is this guy he's talking about? That's happened to me when he did my introduction.
That's exactly what just happened. I was just like, who's this guy he's talking about? I'm just a guy.
So, Justin, welcome. And for anybody that is just tuning in or tuning in very recently, you guys already know, or you may not know, I also teach with a AEP, American Emergency Preparedness, as an online and in-person instructor. And Justin is one of my bosses, so I'm going to behave.
We'll see about that.
Yeah. But I'm so excited to have you. I've been gushing about the articles that you wrote, Justin, about complacency, because I think us in our profession, we sometimes think that complacency and lazy are the same thing. Not so much. Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So, like, complacency to me is like a state of mind, right? Where laziness is kind of a characteristic that you've chose to be. Where complacency is a state of mind that oftentimes we don't really choose to be. We just kind of find ourselves in, if that makes sense.
Like it.
Mm.
So basically, looking at through your first article, which I think I have this order right, it's the dispatcher's toolbox, and then there is the hidden danger of complacency in the 911 industry, and then mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
So so the techniques of basically warding it off. So when you're talking about understanding complacency for you, because at this point you're our guest, so I'm feeling like you are kind of a subject matter expert in this because you've written the articles.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited for our listeners to hear a lot of your take, and of course we'll get into some conversation. But when you're talking about understanding complacency, what would you call those characteristics, or like how would they manifest?
Sure. So I think it's, first and foremost, complacency, again, is that state of mind, right? It's a state of contentment, of self-satisfaction. In its advanced stages, it's usually coupled with a lack of awareness or concern about potential risks or dangers. There's usually a false sense of security and confidence that comes along with it, and almost, like nothing can hurt me type deal. I know more, I know better, I've seen it all, that type of thing. So unfortunately, it's particularly dangerous in our industry. Obviously complacency manifests itself in all industries, but in particular our industry, it's dangerous because it can result in inadequate response times or inadequate responses in general, reduced vigilance, and ultimately a increased risk of failure to the system. All right. So when we talk about how does it manifest? I think it's interesting in my experience and in my observations, it can manifest in different ways, in several different ways, but it can manifest differently depending on how many years of experience one has in the industry. So I think we can kind of agree. We're all trainers here. So,
Yeah.
in looking at it, in my opinion, I think it takes about 5 years to really learn how to do this job, to be really comfortable with
Okay.
this job. So
I
I think,
agree.
that first 6 months is that initial onboarding, the initial training period where you're learning the lingo, getting your feet wet, getting them to a point where they're comfortable enough to sit in the seat by themselves, more or less,
Mhm.
give or take.
Yep.
Then you have this period of time, about a 1 to 2 year mark, where they where something clicks and they finally go, okay, I got this. Like my confidence level's coming up. I'm able to do this job. I'm able to handle my own calls. I can dispatch fine. I can navigate CAD just fine. I'm comfortable. I'm not coming into work, with that feeling in the pit of my stomach. And then the 5 year mark hits. And in my eyes, if you can make it 5 years in this industry and be really good at it, you can make it a career. So
Mhm.
Absolutely.
if we can kind of break up the level of experience in that form. So you have your 6 month, your day 1 to your 1 year mark, your 2 year to 5 year, and then your 5 year on. And then I'd probably even break that up from 10 year on. Would you guys agree with that?
I would say that especially like the first year and a half to 2 years is when you're really on kind of shaky ground, either at dispatch or 911. And hopefully by the end of 2 years, you're at least to the level where you're not terrified every day of coming into work of like, oh my God, what am I going to do if X, Y, or Z happens? And, then kind of starting to, as you said, get comfortable in it to change that mindset to make it a long-term career.
Yeah, exactly. And I think so. I think as far as complacency goes into this, it's kind of interesting that more often than not, you'll find in that day 1 to that 1.5, 2 year mark, you won't find complacency. Not that
Yeah.
often, not usually, right?
Mhm.
And if you are finding complacency in that period of time, then that's probably going to be a personnel issue, or that's probably laziness, right? Because
Yes.
they haven't been
Mhm.
doing it long enough to become complacent. So we talk a lot about the types of personalities that are in this industry. And I think we could agree that the majority of us are that type A personality, the goal oriented, ambitious, competitive, that, high drive, um, hates wasting time, perfectionism, multitasking, all those things, right? That sense of we
Agreed.
have to get that strong, that achievement, right? We
Yeah.
have to be um, challenged. So I don't think we see complacency rear its ugly head in that day 1 to 2 year mark, because we're being challenged every day, because we don't know what we're doing yet. We're still learning. We haven't reached perfectionism yet. We're still striving to get that. So our daily, drive to be challenged is being satiated. So during that time period, so we don't often see complacency in those first 2 years. But something weird happens in that 2 year mark, when that switch flips, so to speak.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, and I went through it myself, and now I can really see it, and I can identify it now as that 2 year mark, that 2 to 5 years. There's a couple year period here where all of a sudden our confidence levels shoot up, because
Yes.
we got this, right? I'm
Yep.
not nervous anymore. I can handle this call that's coming in. I can handle the field responders. I know how to dispatch a box alarm or whatever, whatever your tasks may be. You got it, right? You've seen it all
Mhm.
because I can't have this confidence if I haven't seen it all, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's where complacency all of a sudden starts to kind of make its way into the equation because we're not being challenged as much because we've that we've reached that goal, right? So I think if one in that weird period of time, how it's going to manifest is that overconfidence, right? And then
I agree.
distractions. So overconfidence, it's just again, it's going to be that feeling of we've seen it all. Um, you're overconfident in your abilities. You're looking at the new guys, the quote new people, saying, "Ha, you don't know anything yet," and you're looking at
Yep.
the old timers going like, "Relax, like this isn't, why are you so burnt out?" And
Yep.
then it's also those distractions. So I can pull out my phone now. I can scroll through this
Oh
social
yeah.
media,
You are
all
reading my mind.
it's wild. And um but once you reach that 5 year mark, at some point in that 2 or 3 years of that weird limbo that you're in, the carpet's getting pulled out from underneath you at some point.
Yep.
And us more experienced dispatchers are looking at those individuals that whole time with like this like cruel sense of like, oh, it's coming. They don't even know, but then we're
Yeah.
so excited when it does. It's disgusting, but that's how we live.
Yeah.
Um, but that 5 year mark hits. We've had the carpet pulled out from underneath us, um, where all of a sudden that complacency kind of goes away for a touch, a little period of time. But
Hmm.
then as we start growing professionally, I think complacency can start manifesting in a different way, which is routine fatigue. Now I've been doing it for 8 years, 10 years,
Yeah.
15 years. It's routine fatigue. It's that countless routine calls that we're handling day in and day out. Out of 1,000 calls, we might handle one that's actually, you know,
Exciting.
challenging us, right? So we just naturally become a little less vigilant. We pay a little less attention to the nonverbal cues. I think that's when we can fall into it. So, and then it's also ignoring protocols. And the more experience we get, the more we know better. And this protocol never, why do we ever need an engine on that? We never use the engine company on that. Why do we don't send them until that one time when we do need to send them? So I think there's several different ways that complacency can manifest itself, but I think it's also important to know as a manager or a leader in your department, it's not going to manifest the same way in everybody. And it's going to heavily
True.
depend on the level of experience someone has in the industry.
It's interesting to think about complacency not just as sort of an overarching like this is complacency, but that it has a specific sort of like different types to it. So you've got the complacency of the somewhat experienced person that thinks that they're kind of a hot shot, like, oh yeah, I'm still young and fresh, but I'm also like at the top of my game because I already know what I'm doing. And that's sort of that 2 to 5 year person you were talking about. And then you've got the like old timers complacency where it's just like, yeah, I've seen this all every day. I'm on my third divorce now. I don't care about this. Why do we gotta, change things up?
And so I would be that person because I've got, with the exception of relocating to a couple of places, most of my adult career has been spent doing this. And as you guys are talking about this, I'm literally going back in my memory and I'm sitting at my console and I I can literally play it back in my head where I have not looked at my screen as often as I should. I am scrolling through my phone or I'm looking at Netflix, but because I feel like because I've been doing it this long, 20 plus, I feel like I can have one eye on the screen, one eye on Netflix, one ear to the room and or one ear on the radio. And I feel like because I have been doing it so long that I'm, sad to say it, bulletproof. And I'm not alone in that. It's hard to fight against that when you've been doing it so long.
Absolutely, yeah, because you've got, it's kind of like, I guess, if you're like a pilot and you're not on the takeoff portion of the flight anymore, nor the landing. You're just kind of in the middle of the sky for hours on end. And you're like, yeah, I'll turn the autopilot on and kick back and have a cup of coffee. But you never know when turbulence is going to hit.
Yep.
It'll blindside you on some idle Tuesday.
That's when it's always going to hit. It's, that Sunday night where you're thinking nothing's going to happen on a Sunday night, or a Tuesday afternoon. We always, for some reason, we have it in our head. Oh, only the bad stuff happens on Friday and Saturday nights, and it's like, oh, no, it doesn't.
Not at all. Not at all. Some of the worst moments in my career that I've been a part of have happened not on a Friday or a Saturday. It could be literally a Saturday afternoon, 2:00 at the park.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
you're never prepared for those. But I agree with you because it's routine fatigue, because how many traffic stops can you do in a shift?
Right.
And
Right.
for anybody that might still be wondering something tangible, something that you can actually put your hands on. I would say, if I'm explaining it to someone, I would say routine fatigue looks like you do a traffic stop over and over and over and over again, and you don't run the license plate every single time. Why? Because they're not stolen most of the time until it is. And now what? Now you're waking up and you're kind of startled. Your feet are up on the desk, and now all of a sudden you have to sit up straight in your chair. Whereas if you were doing the tasks the way that they should be done on a regular basis, because you are not complacent or comfortable or relaxed or lax even. Now the rug has been pulled out from underneath you.
Right. And I think, it's important. I mean, I know it sounds cheesy, but, seconds do count. And I think that our reaction time, we need to train ourselves as critical thinkers to keep that reaction time to a minimum. And I always train my guys to say, you got to stay in front of the boulder that's rolling behind you, that's coming to get you. And if your only goal is to stay in front of that the whole time, then you've won. So, but as soon as it runs you over, it's nearly impossible to catch up to it. Not only catch up to it, but get back in front of it. So, complacency, feet up, we've all done it. We're all doing it, myself included. We just fall into it. Well, we have to, practice mindfulness. And, I always try to, this is me talking to myself. Like, we have 8-hour shifts. I'm like, just be mindful for 8 hours, dude. This isn't hard. Just you're there, be alert, know what's going on around you at any given moment. And if you're setting yourself up for success on that one, and then you can deal with everything else as it comes. But if you become complacent, as soon as you put your phone in front of your face, as soon as you put your feet up on the desk, you're allowing, if you're not complacent, you're opening up the door for complacency to walk in. And, I think a lot of times people ask me, well, how do you prevent complacency? And that's kind of step one, is prevention, right?
And I've always told my trainees that, especially on the dispatch side, like, the first 30 seconds of any call is always going to be the hardest part. So when that, officer first keys up and says shots fired, officer down, one running, whatever the case may be, that first 30 seconds when you're trying to take this massively chaotic event that just hit you and turn it into something a little bit ordered and controlled by, getting the call started, getting additional resources, additional police, fire, EMS, whatever, to the scene. That first 30 seconds is going to determine whether that call you're working is going to be something that you're happy about afterward. If you're going to say I accomplished something, and controlling that first, half minute of the call, you'll save yourself a lot of time if you don't have to waste the effort to pull your feet off of the desk and pause your Netflix show and, kind of get back into the world of your actual job.
Right. That's a great way to explain that. That's a great way to explain that, because it's like, you're absolutely right. And the first 30 seconds, it does matter, because, that does set the tone or the course for the rest. And it's like, where our reaction time mentally to anything, what do they say? It's about like 1 to 2 seconds or whatever. So right off the bat, we're at 28 seconds. And then if you have to pause something, that's another 2 to 3 seconds. It's like you start shaving off seconds when you're not in the game to begin with. So that 30 seconds, which is a great amount of time to think about some and critically think your way through this chaos that just got tossed onto your lap. If you're allowing complacency to shave off those seconds that are gifted to you, then you're not really setting yourself up.
Wow, that well said. That's well said. Especially the 30 seconds. I never thought about it like that, because if you're thinking about the seconds that it takes for you to pause your Netflix or put your phone down, remember, and I'm talking to myself, remembering what that was like, because when the ball drops, we'll just put it like that. When the ball drops, your brain goes, okay, what just happened? And if you are on your game, it only takes you, like a heartbeat or two to go, okay, I know exactly what to do. But if you are in the throes of complacency, which is you are laid back, your mind is elsewhere, that picture, you've got one eye on the screen, one eye on the screen that it should be on, one that it shouldn't be on. You only got one ear to the radio or to the phone. You're having to regroup now, because you've missed some things, especially for the radio. When that foot pursuit takes off, they've got one running and they start giving you the description. You got to pause Netflix. You've got to reacclimate yourself to, wait a minute, what now? And now you have to catch up. How long is that? If we're talking 30 seconds, 5, 10, and 30 seconds may not seem like a long time until you start counting 1,000, 2, 1,000, and see just how long 30 seconds is.
Yeah, it seems like you have
Absolutely.
a lifetime, but you don't. It's funny, like anytime we talk about complacency, me specifically, at my center or in front of other people, I'm just like I'm talking to myself, guys, here. This is, I'm not immune to this, and no one can be. And I think, talking about that, I mean, as far as prevention goes, or how to remedy this, number one is prevention, right? And then how do we prevent it is talking about it. I don't think we talk about it enough, or we give it this sense of like that it's bad, and it is bad, right? But it's like we have to talk about it in the sense of like, this is going to happen to you, so let's talk about it so we can understand what it is and how it manifests, so that way we can look inwards and recognize it for ourselves. That'd be optimal, but also for others to say, almost like a peer review, your partner saying, hey, listen, you're a little complacent there, buddy, or something along those lines. If I'm hearing that for the first time, are you complacent? I feel like that's an attack on me.
Yeah.
So immediately I'm going to push them away and I'm going to defend, right? But if I know what complacency is and I know how it manifests, when someone tells me that, hey, you're being a little complacent, now I understand what they're trying to tell me.
Nice.
They're trying to pull me out of it. They're not trying to attack me, right? So now it's more of words of support than it is words of attack. If that makes sense.
I agree wholeheartedly with that, because you're right. The word complacency has a negative. It's associated with a negative. It's like you're calling me a name instead
Yeah,
of.
it's that complacency is the equivalent to lazy.
Yes, and it's
Like
not.
if I don't know what complacency is and someone comes up to me, like the biggest insult to me, in my life is if anyone can come up to me and call me any name in the book, I'm probably not going to care. If someone came up to me and called me lazy, that is the ultimate insult to me,
Yeah.
Yep.
right? So if I don't know what complacency is, and my partner or my trusted um, supervisor or my mentor or whatever you want to call it comes up to me and says I'm complacent and I don't know what that is, and I just make that, the equivalent to lazy, immediately I'm offended.
Yeah.
Immediately I'm
Mm-hmm.
disrespected, and immediately I'm not listening to you anymore. And it's just going to drive me further into that negative mess called complacency. Where if I know what complacency is and I understand what it is, and when someone tells me that, then I can identify it better with myself and be like, you know what, you're right. I have my feet up on the desk. I haven't looked at my protocols. I haven't reviewed my protocols, and I gotta do that. Or, it took me forever and a day to put a car stop in when it should have taken me, a half a second.
Yeah.
These are all
Mm-hmm.
things that I have to think about. Complacency is definitely a quote you issue. I think it can
Okay.
become agency wide if your leadership allows it or ignores complacency issues. It can become an organizational issue. But I think if we can start the conversation right during that initial training phase, and just say, we can instill certain traits in our trainees when they're training to not become complacent, right? Not have lazy training days, because we don't want to promote complacency. So I always
Yeah.
say, like, my goal for the majority of the time during training, I want you to learn something new today. So anytime my trainee would leave, I'd say, what did we learn today? And if you just give me one item, then we just did a great job today, because we weren't complacent and we weren't, quote, lazy. We learned something today, right? So
Nice.
I think we kind of instill complacency inadvertently on our new hires when we clear them out of training. And Eric, I
Okay.
think I've talked to you about this before, about the finish line. Have I discussed
Yes.
this?
Yes. Yes. Because I
So,
used to say it all the time.
so we do it all the time. We congratulate people for reaching the finish line. You've finished training. You've graduated. All these things, right? And we everyone high fives, and we have little pizza parties and cookie parties, and we're just like, yay, congratulations. And what we just inadvertently did, subconsciously did, is allow the trainee to take their foot off the gas.
You're right.
And we've
And I,
just told them, oh, you've finished training. Relax a little bit,
yeah.
because we want to support them, right? We know that they just went through 3 to 6 months of hell, and we want them to be like, okay, take a breath, because we feel like we're helping them and supporting them by saying, go take a breath, go take a vacation, go, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And but what we've just done is open that door touch to complacency and say it's okay to let off the gas a little bit.
That's why I always told my trainees when they finish training, now anyone that dies is your responsibility.
It's such an eye-opening comment, huh? Because
Nice.
all of a
Yeah.
sudden it's that oh shit moment in their head, going like, oh no,
Yeah.
I I don't have that safety net anymore.
Yep.
Where's Gary?
I have
Oh, where?
abandoned you.
Yeah.
And it's
Um,
funny. This runs right into. I was going to ask that question when it comes to instilling complacency. Whether obviously it's not on purpose. I don't think any agency sets out to do that. I don't think
no.
any trainee is thinking about it. For one, they don't even know what it is, and I don't think any CTO is looking to do that. So, and I'm asking myself this: can you become complacent in leadership? Because I know when we talk about complacency, most of the time we're talking about on the phone or on the radio. But can we be complacent in leadership, supervision?
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree.
I think it's so very important that leaders do not become complacent, but I think it's impossible for anyone not to become complacent at some time or at some period. So it's just a matter of like complacency again is definitely one of those things that has to be self-identified to make the course correction. Someone can tell me until they're blue in the face that I'm being complacent. If I don't believe it myself, I'm not listening.
True.
So as a leader, I'm constantly looking inward. Are these decisions that I'm making the best decisions today? Because decisions that I'm making today might be the best for today, but might not be the best decisions for tomorrow. So I think, that again, practicing mindfulness and just being ultimately present in the moment is important and is what's probably going to be the kind of the biggest or most effective remedy of complacency. So it definitely rears its ugly head though in leadership. And I think when that happens, you run the risk of it becoming a bigger organizational issue, because there's not going to be many people. Your subordinates might not even feel comfortable coming to you to tell you that you're being complacent.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons.
Sure.
I try to instill in my guys like you need to tell me if I'm not doing something that you feel I should be doing because I might not see it. I'm looking through a different lens. So
Yes.
I might miss something and I depend on them heavily to come to me and say you're not making this decision correctly because you don't have this piece of information. And well, now I'm going to pivot a little bit because I do have that other piece of information now, and it's a two-way street. I'm also telling them because they're looking through a different lens as well.
Yeah.
I might have a better understanding of that lens because I've been through it, but I'm not looking through that lens anymore. So they're going to have different information or a different perspective than me. I think that's important as far as like a leadership thing goes is acknowledging that there's going to be a different perspective and you have to be okay with that.
Yes.
And as far as complacency goes, there's a different perspective of complacency too, and different levels of, different standards of complacency.
Yeah.
What I believe to be complacent, someone else may not believe is complacent. And we have to communicate and come to a common ground as far as what can we agree on that's complacent and how can we fix this? And that's done through communication.
I agree. So, and this is just a question that I'm coming up with off the top of my head. So I'm wondering, and this is to both of you, for either your center or in leadership, is there something that we in leadership can do to help help our charges? I like to call them charges instead of just employees. What can we do to help them? I know we said it's an inward thing and we should be looking inward, but remember, most of the people under us don't have the tool for that. So just brainstorming in the moment, what can we do as leaders? We're all supervisors here, even though we've been trainers and been where they're about to go. Can you think of something something practical that we can do?
I think it was in your dispatcher toolbox article that you wrote. You had said something like change responsibilities or switch them up. So I think that giving some either special assignments or just making sure that every day is not the same day for the employee or the supervisor, what have you, will really help that out. So one of the things we do at our center is we have, permanent radios, which is kind of a perk of seniority, but it also can create a lot of complacency because you're like, yeah, these are the same streets every day. I know how they work. I work with the same officers. They interact with the same, 50 people. So that can kind of encourage complacency. And,
Yeah.
maybe switching that up a bit, just to give them something new, because when your brain feels something new, it engages a lot more than if it's, if you're eating a, ham and cheese sandwich every day, it's not going to appreciate that very much.
And I think it goes back to the challenge part, right? You have to be challenged as type A personalities. And I think that's not even a type A personality thing. I think that's across the board. I think you could generalize it. Everyone wants to be challenged at some point, or at least, like you said, activate the brain a little bit. So, if they're bored, make them not be bored, right? So try to challenge them in some way. So definitely, like, rotating responsibilities is something important. Keeping an eye on things as far as a leadership standpoint, quality assurance is absolutely paramount, because, again, you can start to review and identify areas where people might be becoming complacent, and
Yeah.
where organizationally the agency may become complacent.
Yeah.
I think it all starts, we harp on basics and fundamentals, and one of the basics and fundamentals that we have to harp on is in training and talking about complacency again, but really just changing some key terminology, as far as, instead of saying finish lines and that sort of thing, we're saying benchmarks. The finish
Yeah.
line isn't until retirement. And
Yep.
even until retirement, after retirement, there's probably going to be some new goals set and some new benchmarks set. But if you're pushing and you're telling your dispatchers along the way, and you keep instilling that as you move forward, when they're in their 2 and 5 year mark, and you make that kind of, a culture in your organization or in your agency, to say, we're going to always continue moving forward, and we're always going to continue to challenge ourselves. There's plenty out there for us to challenge ourselves, just with technology alone.
True.
Technology, I mean, I've been in this for a little over 8 years, and technology has advanced in a wild way.
Yeah.
In just 8 years. And it's continuing to grow and advance. So if any agency's out there saying, oh, what can we challenge our dispatchers with? Like, just pull anything out of the air, because that's what you need work on. So,
Yeah.
instilling or fostering this culture of complacency is real, and it's there, and we have to challenge ourselves. I think that one of the biggest things that we do, Ted and I at AEP, what we really preach is 2-hour, we call them monthly trainings. And all they are is discussion starters. So you can come up with anything that you think your agency needs that particular month. So I'll just kind of use something obvious. As we get close to the winter time, we start reviewing our protocols for our ice rescues in Massachusetts. So,
Wow.
and that's, we call it 2 hours. And in my department, we have 4 groups, and we, as a group, we take 2 hours during a particular shift, and we just talk about ice rescues. So usually it's associated with some sort of scenario that's, made up. And then we just kind of talk about that scenario and how it's going to build and how it's going to come at us. And, what are some of the, oddities of it, and how are we going to react to those oddities? And, well, what if this is happening during the incident? Or, we have in our city, we have a heavy rescue. What if that's not available? What are we doing now? What's the backup plan? What are the contingency plans? And all we're doing is just kind of challenging ourselves. And now, if we can kind of foster this culture of that, those conversations are happening weekly, all
Yeah.
the time, just even between 2 partners, or, a group or something, or these after actions, a call happens and you can sit down as a group and kind of go over a very quick, unofficial after action and kind of just say, okay, call came in, Susan, you took that call. How'd you feel about it? All right, Erica, are there any other questions you would have asked?
Yeah.
Okay, great. What was the response to that? Or you dispatched it all that way? That was kind of a unique way you dispatched that. Why did you do it that way? And it just kind of creates conversation. And I think that helps to combat complacency, and if those conversations stop, then it's very easy to replace. We don't like to sit there and do nothing. So we replace it with social media. We replace it with texting our friends outside of work or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that for like example, in terms of the complacency, we had what you guys in Massachusetts probably wouldn't consider much, but down in Central Texas, we had a winter storm event that kind of shut the entire civilization down for 5 or 6 days, and it was really tough in a lot of ways. And Erica, we will get to an episode on this, I promise.
Yes, no kidding. With Snowmageddon, it's coming.
Yeah, but it was interesting because immediately you saw all of the complacency vanish because everybody was in a new situation with critical work to be done, and it was tough because we were working double shifts the whole week. Those of us that could make it into work, everybody else was just trying to survive without power and water and being able to travel. And so we had a lot of new scenarios come up, like what do we do when officers can't travel to this location because the roads are too icy. So it really, I think, during that week, it was a lot of. I don't want to use the word fun, but I'm going to because it was fun. It was exciting. It was engaging. It was like, okay, this is something new that I can do as part of my career and my job, rather than just sort of the day in, day out, drudgery of casual life. So I definitely agree with you there that having a change of not focus, but I guess a change of job duties, I guess, for a bit was really a way to kind of pick everybody up.
Well, and we also ended up doing an after action in a way because we had never had Snowmageddon on this level before. I mean, it shut down, as you said, civilization, but we're just going to hone in on our little corner of the world. In Central Texas, we don't do ice. We do not do snow. We don't do that. So we shut down everything and nothing was open. So when it was over, we had to reevaluate the way we did business for when this happens the next time. If it happens the next time, it might not be snow the next time. It might be flooding. It might be some mass power outage situation. Who knows? And we had to. I wasn't in supervision at the time, but I'm hearing. Am I right, Gary? You guys had to do an after action.
Yes, yeah, and then also fill out all of those fun ICS forms for federal reimbursement. It was good times.
Good times. So you guys probably don't think too much of that at all in Massachusetts because that's your day in and day out. But
I was going to say all that for a little snow. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Well, remember, we don't even own snow plows. We don't even.
I was going to say, do you guys have snow blowers down there? I don't know.
No,
nope.
we do
We
not.
got leaf blowers.
Yeah,
we got leaf blowers. We have now. We have hot weather protocols. You talk about hot weather, we got you all day.
Yep.
You start
All
talking
day.
about ice and snow and whatnot. That's just wrong on so many levels. It's just not okay.
And I
It's
think
not
it's this. Even this conversation is very interesting to me, and we teach all over the country, and it's so interesting to me to like see what other people's like big emergencies are that are not emergencies for. So if I was talking about like you guys are talking about a snow emergency down your area, and I'm going like, come on, relax, like it's just snow. But if I was talking about the same scenario in my neck of the woods to someone from Minnesota, they're going to say the same thing. Like, really? Snow?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, don't
Yeah.
you know you only had 2 feet of snow? That's not too bad.
Exactly. They're like, wow, we had 2 feet of snow yesterday on top of the 6 we already have. You know,
Or
so interesting.
or we can say, just think, what was it, last month, June, I was in Massachusetts and the heat there was supposedly a thing. And I'm looking around going, "Psh, this is not hot, guys. We
Yeah.
are accustomed to 106 and up. I think it was last year, right? I think we got up to like 106, 108 one day. And that was the actual
Mhm.
temperature, not the feels like. So
Yep.
it,
In
you're right.
Massachusetts, if it hits 100 degrees, it literally shuts things down. 100
You
degrees.
shut down for 100 degrees.
Yep.
See?
Construction sites shut down at 100 degrees. See
Oh,
you later.
wow. Really? That's
So yeah, I
Wow.
mean, yeah, it's just interesting, like different parts of the country, different cultures in the country, how they interact, and like they have different protocols for one thing might seem like nothing to you
Mhm.
guys, and it might seem like a world-ending catastrophe to us. So that is very intriguing.
Yeah. And I think that it's so important to open up the conversation, like, for, if you're having an emergency like that, I'm really hoping that your leadership team is reaching out to New England states or to the, you know, Midwest, northern Midwest states, to say, how are you guys handling this? What are we doing wrong? Because we don't do this every day. You guys do this every day.
yeah.
So it's important to network um, nationally, so we can have these types of conversations and learn from each other, because you know it's one of those things where we say one person's emergency might not be another's, um,
Yes.
and it goes that's organizationally as well. So, but as far as complacency, in that relation and that aspect, uh, our complacency issues might be very different from your complacency issues. So, again, opening up that communication with other departments, and creating those relationships with other departments to say, hey, listen, we're dealing with this complacency issue in our department. Have you dealt with this before? Um, to see if you can get some feedback on maybe what they did to help, because everything's so different, and
Yeah.
it's we sometimes, I feel like in this industry we have such egos, and we're not reaching out to get someone else's help. We don't
Right.
need help,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Because we don't.
just ask for help. It's not a big deal.
Yeah,
Just
well, because we
ask.
don't have. Well, because we don't have those problems, of course.
Right,
Complacency
exactly.
is an issue that happens over yonder, not over
Yeah,
here. So
exactly.
I think you're 100% right. It starts with the conversation. It starts with acknowledging, one, that it is a thing,
Mm,
and getting rid of, or minimizing, if at all possible, the negative image, the stigma that comes with complacency, because most people don't know that it is not the same as being lazy. I love the way you put it at the top of the show. Lazy is a choice. Complacency is something that you look up and realize, oh, snap, that's where I am. And half the time, we don't even know how we got there. So,
mhm,
education is important, making sure that people know, one, what it is, and one, and also what it is not. And I think leadership is responsible in a lot of ways to begin that conversation, as you said wisely, in training at the beginning of the career, constantly speaking on it and making sure they know what it is and what it isn't, so that hopefully in the back of their mind it'll dance around from time to time. The conversation will come up, and if we
mm.
continually create environments or create circumstances where complacency doesn't have an opportunity to set in, that's another way that we can help mitigate it. I'm excited for us to possibly have another conversation about this, because there's no way 30 minutes to an hour will be enough.
No, and I mean,
I
I could
agree.
talk for hours and until you just stop recording me, and
Well, that sounds
please
like an
stop
invitation
talking,
to.
Justin.
Well, that just sounds like an invitation to come back and let's talk about it because you got 3 articles on this, and between the three of us, what are we looking at? We've got, let's see, 8, 15. I'm ancient, so we've got at least 35 years, maybe even 40, probably 40 plus years of experience concentrated right here. There's got to be more that we can say about this.
Absolutely. And I was telling Gary earlier, like a lot of, I wrote these quote articles as conversation starters. And what I'm really hoping is that people, they're very short, they're sweet, they're to the point. They just kind of throw a blurb out. And they're not all inclusive. And I'm always open to, other perspectives on complacency. This isn't the end all be all. This wasn't a research topic that I sat down and did a thesis on. This was just some stuff that was in my brain that I got out onto paper so I wouldn't drive myself nuts. And my hope is someone reads it, brings it back to their center, talks to their partner next to them and says, hey, listen, like, just read this article about complacency. And then it just drives a conversation. And hopefully another person jumps in, and leadership jumps in. And it just creates conversation. That's all. I think that's why I really love your podcast. It's doing is it creates conversation, and I love it. I love it.
Thank you
Well,
very
thank you.
much. Yeah, thank you. So I think that's about all the time we have. I'm kind of stealing your thunder here, Gary.
Go
But
ahead.
but I could do the shameless plug, Justin. But if someone is hearing us for the first time or second time and they don't know who AEP is, go ahead, shameless plug.
Oh God. So AP, American Emergency Preparedness, Ted Bourgeois and I started this many years ago. After we kind of saw some, kind of the same stuff happening in training and kind of the same check the box training that was out there, and we said, you know what, we want to bring some realism back to training. And so we talk about basics and fundamentals. We harp on those, and we bridge the gap between communication and best practices. And we kind of leave the fluff out of training, and we just talk and create conversation. And I think it's a very unique way of bringing training back in professional development, kind of getting away from training, that term, and going more with professional development.
I can testify to that because and I think another way that I have found to kind of explain what it's like to do or participate in AEP training is this podcast right here is very real. It's very raw. It's very real world. There's very little fluff involved. That's what the training is like, and I think it's something that's missing in our training environments. There's nothing wrong with checking boxes. That's fine. But what about the practical, real world experience that these people can relate to? Something that they can take back to their centers and say, I don't have to imagine how to take this training and apply it. I got some real world examples in the training that I can take back to my center. That is a student of AAP and also an instructor and also a telecommunicator. I can appreciate that because we have all been to those trainings where we kind of nod off and we're struggling to stay awake because it's very generic, right? It's very generic and there's some value to that, obviously, because you can't make training, you can't tailor it to every center in our nation. There's no way. But I think
but you can bring the relevancy back to it.
Yes.
We've all sat in those classes where we're like, how is this relevant to my day to day?
Yeah.
Our goal is to physically hand you tools that you can bring back that are tangible, that you can use day in and day out. And really bring a practical sense back to this job and not just theoretics and, it'd be nice and just harp on, all this stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with us. But, bring actual tools back with you. I think we do an okay job with that.
Well, Justin, thank you for joining us here today and for being a part of the discussion on complacency. We would like to thank you all for listening as well. Please help us to spread the word about Lifeline 911 to others by liking and subscribing to the podcast, as well as emailing us if you have any questions or topics that you would like to see covered. Again, Justin, thank you so much for joining us today. And he's with American Emergency Preparedness, a website and company that helps to prepare America for emergencies. From all of us at Lifeline 911, I'm Gary.
I'm Erica.
And we will see you next week. Thank you for watching our production of Lifeline 911 podcast. If you have any questions about the topics we discussed today, or if there's something specific you'd like us to cover in a future episode, send us your questions at lifeline911podcast@gmail.com. Stay safe out there. Until next time, this is Lifeline 911 signing off.